All right, let's take a look through some of the top stories that are making headlines in today's French newspapers. Flo Villamino has been avidly reading them for us. Hello there, Flo. And we're going to start off with an American story that's playing out quite well here in the French media, playing big rather than well. Libération talking about the latest controversial comments from Donald Trump.
That's right. He's at it again, except for this time, Libération says that it appears that Donald Trump has gone too far. It seems like we say this every time he says something.
Yes, exactly.
This is the front page of Libération. Ça dérape. Donald Trump is skidding off track. So these are comments that he made yesterday in Wilmington, North Carolina. He suggested that Second Amendment diehards might be the only ones who can stop Hillary Clinton if she makes it to the White House. Now, his campaign says this was just a reference to gun rights voters, mobilizing them essentially. But the remarks have been widely interpreted as joking, essentially, about using guns against his Democratic rival and essentially inciting violence.
Interesting picture they've chosen there for the front
taken
page.
in Scotland, actually, on one of his golf courts, must you say.
Right, I was going to say, it looks like sand dunes. I don't think it looks like that in North Carolina right now. These comments coming out as quite a few high-profile Republicans are speaking out against Donald Trump.
That's right. This week, 50 very high-profile Republicans, national security experts, in fact, wrote an open letter warning that Trump would be the most reckless president in American history. This is Libération's editorial that's actually reassured by this turn of events, says that, it shows that spreading fear about the future, about other people, this kind of technique can work for a while, but it's not a real policy in a democracy. Insults and provocations are Trump's method. It's what's allowed him to get this far, but it seems like it's turning against him now. His campaign is shattering. Éclatement, that means kind of bursting into pieces. That being said, though, Libération says, don't get too excited yet. His campaign very well could make a comeback.
It's been just such an unpredictable campaign so far, hasn't it? Anything could happen. Throughout it, Donald Trump has spoken about one man who the papers are picking up on today, a sort of a bromance, perhaps, with the Russian President Vladimir Putin.
That's right. There certainly is a lot of mutual admiration between Putin and Trump. Slate interviews a journalist, Ann Applebaum, who is actually a columnist for the Washington Post, about this bromance. You can see this quote here. She says, "I think that Trump admires Putin because he incarnates everything that Trump would like to become." To quote her in this interview, she says, "Putin is a very rich man at the head of what is, if you look at it in a certain way, a criminal empire. He has no opposition. He's tamed the media. Essentially, Putin is a role model for Trump." But more than that, she goes so far as to say that Trump wants to become the American Putin.
All right. Well, Putin himself also grabbing headlines in his own right. This after he met with Turkey's president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. It's like a sort of a who's who of the most talked about men in the world at the moment, isn't it?
Exactly. Now, Libération talks about this meeting and says it's not the entente cordiale, it's the pragmatic entente. It's a very strategic friendship, according to Libération, a rekindling of ties that's really troubling for European leaders who've already voiced their concern over a series of purges that we saw in Turkey in the wake of last month's failed coup attempt. Now, Libération is also looking at one of the consequences of all this, and Libé says that the Turkish president is actually threatening to scrap a deal about the migrants. We talked a whole lot about this deal, how Turkey's going to take in more migrants. It made this deal with the EU. Well, Libération says that things are so bad between the EU and the Turkish president that for now that deal is on hold.
It does seem to be, doesn't it? That migrant deal negotiated in large part by the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Her country, of course, taking in well over 1 million migrants last year. According to Le Figaro today, she's in hot water.
That's right. Merkel's popularity is in a free fall, according to Le Figaro here. Her approval rating is currently 47%. You can see this graph here in the bottom left-hand corner. It's dropped essentially 10 points in the last month. Of course, in last month, Germany had this series of attacks, and Le Figaro says that a majority of Germans aren't satisfied with the way that the German Chancellor has dealt with last month's attacks, and as well as her very generous migrant policy. The Chancellor has vowed to continue with this very generous policy despite those attacks.
And just returning to Libération, they're also picking up on the migrant issue today.
That's right. Libération reports that here in Paris, over the past couple of weeks, authorities have been multiplying ID checks and dismantling refugee camps. You can see they're saying that migrants are being relentlessly driven out. Now, associations and charities have accused law enforcement officials of harassing these migrants. Now, authorities say they are going to set up camps for migrants in Paris at the end of September. But in the meantime, the authorities are drawing a lot of criticism for the way they're dealing with it.
All right, let's finish off with some good news for French people, particularly French sports fans. It's been a bit of a medal-rich day at the Olympics for Team France.
That's right.
That's nice,
Finally, some gold. That's what you can read on the front page of L'Equipe here. France won its first gold medal in a team sport, show jumping. You can see the team there. Also kayaking, a gold medal there. Le Parisien says, we just had to wait for Tuesday for us to get all these medals. Now,
I love that sort of caveat. They can't just be like, oh, they've won gold. It's like finally.
Finally, exactly. But there is one medal that is not so good, and that is the medal that Slate gives to the French media for their coverage of these Olympics, particularly female athletes. You can see these words here that have been thrown out against, well, the way they describe female athletes. I must admit, it's quite staggering. They have some quotes where they said, on top of everything, she's quite cute, and French athletes are cuter than all the other athletes, and all sorts of really outrageous things like that. Now, it must be said, this comes as a civil rights group has actually accused a public TV channel of having a colonialist coverage of the opening ceremony. So clearly the French media has some serious training to do to make it into the 21st century.
Of course, we don't include France 24 in that flow. Thanks very much for that look through the papers. And I have to tell you, our producer was booing those comments in my earpiece while Flo was talking there. So no sexism here. We're going to take a short break right now here on Live from Paris. We'll see you in a couple of minutes' time.